The bridge of the New Horizon hummed with quiet energy as Captain Jake Martinez watched the stars through the main view screen. 3 months had passed since they left Earth on humanity's first deep space exploration mission. The crew of 200 had grown used to the endless black of space, but today felt different. Today, they were about to make history. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," called out Lieutenant Danny Brooks from his position at the communications console. The young officer's hands moved quickly across the control panel, his dark hair falling slightly over his forehead as he concentrated. "It's not from Earth, sir." Jake felt his heart skip a beat. After decades of searching, humanity had finally found proof they weren't alone in the universe. "Put it through, Danny." The main screen flickered, and suddenly the bridge filled with a strange, beautiful sound. It was like music mixed with words, flowing together in patterns that somehow made sense even though none of them had heard anything like it before. "Computer, begin translation protocol," Jake ordered. The ship's advanced AI had been programmed with every known language, pattern, and mathematical sequence. If anyone could figure out what these aliens were saying, it would be their computer. Lisa Parker hurried onto the bridge, her blonde hair tied back in a neat ponytail. As the ship's head of xenobiology, she had been waiting for this moment her entire career. "Captain, the computer's already breaking down their language structure. It seems they use a combination of tonal shifts and mathematical progressions to communicate." "How long until we can talk back?" Jake asked. "Give me 20 minutes, Lisa replied, her blue eyes bright with excitement. 23 minutes later, the translation system was ready. Jake straightened his uniform and looked around at his crew. Every face showed the same mix of excitement and nervousness he felt. They were about to become the first humans to speak with another intelligent species. "Open a channel," he ordered. The screen flickered again, and this time an image appeared.
Ow.
The entire bridge fell silent. The being on the screen was unlike anything they had imagined. She was tall and graceful, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow with inner light. Her hair was long and silver, moving as if it were floating in water. But it was her eyes that caught everyone's attention. They were a deep, violet color that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages. She wore what looked like armor made of crystal, and behind her they could see others of her kind moving through what appeared to be a magnificent ship. Everything about her spoke of advanced technology and ancient civilization. "Greetings, unknown vessel," she said, and the translation system rendered her voice in perfect English. It was clear and musical, with an accent that reminded Jake of wind chimes. "I am Princess Lirelei, Star Weaver of the Celestial Empire. Have entered territory belonging to the Valareth people. State your purpose." Jake stepped forward, trying to look as official as possible. "Your Highness, I am Captain Jake Martinez of the human exploration vessel New Horizon. We come in peace, seeking knowledge and friendship with other intelligent life." The princess studied him for a moment, her violet eyes taking in every detail. "Of the human bridge?" "Humans," she repeated slowly, as if testing the word. "We have not encountered your species before. You are far from any known inhabited systems or explorers, Your Highness. We've traveled far from our homeworld to see what's out there among the stars." Princess Lirelei nodded slowly. "Very well, Captain Martinez. The Celestial Empire welcomes peaceful contact with new species. We will arrange for proper diplomatic protocols to be established." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in excited chatter. They had done it. They had made contact with an alien civilization, and it had gone better than anyone had dared hope. Over the next few hours, messages went back and forth between the two ships. The Valareth, as they called themselves, were indeed highly advanced. They had been traveling between stars for thousands of years and controlled a vast empire that stretched across dozens of star systems. They were willing to share some of their knowledge with humanity, but only if proper diplomatic relations could be established. Danny Brooks found himself assigned as the primary communications officer for the historic talks. At 26, he was young for such an important job. But he had a natural talent for languages, and had already begun to understand the subtle tones and patterns of Valareth speech. The second formal communication session was scheduled for the next day. This time, It would be a full diplomatic meeting with multiple representatives from both sides. Jake had spent hours coaching his crew on proper protocol, reminding them that everything they said and did would be studied by historians for generations to come. But when the time came for the meeting, Danny was running late. He had been working all night on refining the translation protocols and had fallen asleep at his console. Tony Rodriguez, his best friend and the ship's head of security, had to shake him awake just minutes before the scheduled contact. "Come." On Sleeping Beauty, Tony laughed, his brown eyes twinkling with amusement. Time to make history. Danny stumbled to his feet, running his hands through his messy hair. He looked down at his wrinkled uniform and groaned. "I look terrible. You look fine," Tony assured him. "Just remember what the captain said about being formal and respectful." Danny nodded and took his position at the communications console. The main screen activated, and once again, Princess Lirelei appeared. This time, she was accompanied by several other Valoreth, all wearing the same crystal armor and carrying themselves with the same Vel's dignity. But Danny barely noticed the others. His attention was completely focused on the princess. The clearer transmission, he could see that she was even more beautiful than he had first thought. Her skin had a subtle shimmer to it, like moonlight on water, and her silver hair moved with a life of its own. When she spoke, her voice was like music. "Greetings, representatives of humanity," she began formally. "I am pleased to continue our discussions regarding diplomatic relations between our peoples." Captain Martinez stepped forward and began the formal response they had practiced. But Danny found himself staring at the princess, his heart beating faster than it should have been. There was something about her that made it hard to think clearly. Maybe it was her otherworldly beauty, or the way she carried herself with such confidence and grace. Without thinking, Danny leaned forward and spoke into his microphone. "Hey, beauty princess." The words were out before he could stop them. The entire bridge went silent. Captain Martinez turned to stare at him in horror. Tony's mouth fell open. Dr. Parker looked like she might faint. On the screen, Princess Lirelei's violet eyes flashed with an emotion that needed no translation. Anger. Pure, royal anger. "Watch your mouth, human," she snapped, her musical voice now sharp as a blade. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the bridge of the New Horizon in complete silence. Danny stared at the blank screen, his heart racing not just from embarrassment, but from something else, something he couldn't quite identify. Even angry, she had been magnificent. "Brooks," Captain Martinez said quietly, and Danny could hear the barely controlled fury in his voice. "Report to my ready room now." As Danny walked toward the captain's office, he could feel every eye on the bridge following him. In less than 10 seconds, he had managed to insult an alien princess and possibly doom humanity's first chance at joining a galactic civilization. But despite the trouble he was in, despite the fact that his career was probably over, Danny couldn't stop thinking about those violet eyes and the way his heart had raced when she looked at him. He was in serious trouble, but somehow he didn't regret what he had said. He just wished he could take it back and try again. Captain Jake Martinez paced back and forth in his ready room, his hands clenched behind his back. Danny Brooks sat in the chair across from his desk, looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. The silence between them stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Jake finally asked, his voice deadly quiet. Danny swallowed hard. "I messed up, sir. I know that." "Messed up?" Jake stopped pacing and turned to face him. "Danny, you just insulted the princess of an alien empire. An empire that has weapons and technology we can't even imagine. An empire that could wipe us out without breaking a sweat." "I didn't mean to insult her," Danny said quietly. "I just... ... She was so beautiful, and I wasn't thinking clearly." Rubbed his forehead, feeling a headache coming on. "That's exactly the problem, Lieutenant. You weren't thinking at all." Before Danny could respond, the communication system crackled to life. Captain Martinez to the bridge immediately came the urgent voice of his second-in-command, Commander Sarah Blake. Both men hurried to the bridge where they found the crew gathered around the main console. Commander Blake, a tall woman with short red hair, looked up as they approached. Her green eyes were worried. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from the Valoreth ship," she reported. "But it's not from the princess. It's from someone called the High Admiral." "Put it through," Jake ordered, straightening his uniform. The main screen flickered to life, showing a Valoreth male who was clearly much older than Princess Lirelei. His skin was a deeper blue, and his silver hair was shorter and more formal. Looking, unlike the princess, his crystal armor was decorated with symbols that clearly marked him as a military leader. When he spoke, his voice was cold and commanding. "Captain Martinez of the human vessel," he began without any greeting. "I am High Admiral Theron of the Imperial Fleet. You will listen carefully to what I am about to say." Jake stepped forward. "Admiral, I want to apologize for what happened earlier. My officer spoke without thinking, and we deeply regret any offense." The Admiral's violet eyes showed no emotion. "Your regret is noted but insufficient," the insult offered to Princess. "Lirelei, heir to the celestial throne, cannot be overlooked. By the ancient laws of our people, such disrespect toward royalty demands justice." "What kind of justice?" Jake asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. "The human who spoke those words must face trial before the High Council of Crystallia. If he is found guilty, he will be punished according to our laws. If he refuses to face trial, or if your people attempt to flee, all of humanity will be marked as enemies of the Celestial Empire." Danny felt the blood drain from his face. He looked around the bridge and saw the same fear in every face. Because of his stupid comment, he had put his entire species at risk. "And if we agree to the trial," Jake asked, "then the human will accompany our escort ship to Crystallia, our capital world. There he will face the High Council and accept whatever judgment they decree. This is the only way to avoid war between our peoples." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Everyone turned to look at Danny, who felt smaller than he had ever felt in his life. "I'll go," he said quietly. "This is my fault. I'll face their trial." "Like hell you will," came a voice from behind them. Tony Rodriguez stepped onto the bridge, his dark eyes blazing with anger. "They're not taking my best friend to some alien planet to be executed for a stupid comment." "Tony, I have to go," Danny said. "If I don't, they'll consider all humans their enemies." "Do you know what that means?" "They have an empire that spans dozens of star systems. They could destroy Earth before we even knew they were coming." Dr. Lisa Parker spoke up from her position near the science station. "Actually, that might not be entirely true." Everyone turned to look at her, and she continued nervously. "I've been studying their transmissions, analyzing their language patterns and cultural references. The Valoreth seem to be very concerned with honor and proper behavior. Not just angry about the insult, they're genuinely shocked by it." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. Lisa pulled up a display showing her analysis of the Valoreth communications. "Their entire society seems to be built around formal protocols and respect for authority. From what I can tell, no one has ever spoken to their royalty the way Danny did. They literally don't know how to handle it." "So what are you saying?" Danny asked. "I'm saying that maybe this isn't just about punishment. Maybe they're trying to understand us as much as we're trying to understand them. They need to know if Danny's comment represents how all humans think, or if he's just ... unusual." Tony snorted. "Oh, Danny's definitely unusual." Despite everything, Danny found himself smiling slightly. "Thanks, buddy." Captain Martinez considered Dr. Parker's words carefully. "So you think they might be willing to listen during this trial? That it's not just a death sentence?" "I think it's possible," Lisa said. "But Danny would need to be very careful about how he explains himself, and he'd need help understanding their culture better." Jake made his decision. "All right. You'll go to their trial, but you won't go alone. Dr. Parker, I want you to go with him as a cultural advisor. And Tony, you'll go as his security escort." "Sir, I don't think they'll allow," Lisa began. "I want to understand humanity," Jake interrupted. "Then they'll get to see what humanity is really like. We don't abandon our people, and we don't face our problems alone." 3 hours later, Danny found himself aboard a Valoreth escort ship called the Starwind. The ship was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of the same crystal material as their armor, and they glowed with a soft blue light. There were no sharp edges anywhere. Everything curved and flowed like it had been grown rather than built. The Valoreth crew kept their distance from the humans, speaking in low tones among themselves. Danny couldn't understand what they were saying, but he could feel their eyes on him whenever he moved. Dr. Parker spent most of her time studying everything she could see, taking notes on her portable computer. "This is incredible," she whispered to Danny as they walked through one of the ship's corridors. "Their technology is so far beyond ours, it's like comparing a stone tool to a computer." Tony, meanwhile, kept a close watch on their guards. "They're not treating us like prisoners," he observed quietly. "More like ... guests they're not sure they trust." The journey to Crystalia took 2 days. During that time, Danny tried to learn as much as he could about Valoreth culture from their guards. Most of them were polite but distant, answering his questions with short, formal responses. But one young Valoreth, named Kale, seemed more curious about the humans than afraid of them. "You really spoke to Princess Lirelei without permission?" Kale asked during one of their conversations. His English was heavily accented but understandable. "Didn't know I needed permission," Danny replied. "On Earth, if you see someone beautiful, you might compliment them. It's considered polite." Kale's violet eyes widened in amazement. "You compliment royalty the same way you compliment common people." "We don't really have royalty on Earth," Danny explained. "Not anymore. Everyone is supposed to be equal." This seemed to shock Kale even more. "No royalty? No noble houses?
Ow.
Do you maintain order?" Danny tried to explain democracy and elected governments, but he could see that Kale was having trouble understanding the concept. To the Valoreth, the idea that common people could choose their own leaders was as foreign as their crystal technology was to humans. As they approached Crystalia, Danny got his first look at the Valoreth homeworld through the ship's viewing port. It was beautiful beyond description. The planet seemed to glow with the same soft light as their ships, and he could see massive cities that looked like they were carved from single, enormous crystals. "It's amazing," he breathed. Kale stood beside him, looking proud. Crystalia has been the heart of our empire for over 10,000 years. It is the most beautiful world in the galaxy." Danny was about to agree when he noticed something odd. "Kale, are all your cities the same?" The young Valoreth looked confused. "Of course. Why would they be different? We achieved perfect design long ago. There's no need to change what is already perfect." As they descended toward the planet's surface, Danny began to understand what Dr. Parker had meant about the Valoreth. Being shocked by his behavior? These people had spent thousands of years perfecting their society until everything was exactly the way they thought it should be. The idea of someone acting spontaneously without following proper protocol was completely outside their experience. But as beautiful as their world was, Danny couldn't help noticing that it also seemed somehow ... empty. There was no variation, no sense of growth or change. Everything was perfect, but it was a cold, static perfection. He was beginning to wonder if maybe, just maybe, the Valoreth needed to meet humanity as much as humanity needed to meet them. The question was whether he would live long enough to find out. The ship touched down on a landing platform made of smooth, glowing crystal, and Danny took a deep breath. His trial was about to begin, and with it, the future of 2 species would be decided. The Great Hall of Justice on Crystalia was the most magnificent room Danny had ever seen. The walls rose hundreds of feet above his head, made entirely of crystal that shifted colors like a rainbow. Light seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, making the entire space glow with an otherworldly beauty. At the center of the hall stood a curved table where 7 Valoreth judges sat in their crystal armor, their violet eyes fixed on the 3 humans who stood before them. Danny felt very small as he looked up at the High Council. Each judge was ancient by human standards, their blue skin deeper and more weathered than the younger Valoreth he had met. They wore robes of flowing silver that seemed to move on their own, and their expressions were as cold as winter stone. In the center of the judges sat Emperor Valdris himself. Danny had never seen the Emperor before, but there was no mistaking who he was. He was taller than the other Valoreth, and his presence filled the room like a physical force. His silver hair was long and braided with what looked like small stars, and when he spoke, his voice echoed through the crystal hall. "Human called Danny Brooks," the Emperor began, his words formal and measured. "You stand accused of showing disrespect to Princess Lirelei Starweaver, heir to the celestial throne and daughter of the imperial house. How do you answer this charge?" Danny swallowed hard and stepped forward. Dr. Parker had coached him on proper protocol during the journey. But standing here in this incredible hall, facing beings who had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, all her advice seemed to vanish from his mind. "Your Imperial Majesty," he began, trying to keep his voice steady. "I do not deny that I spoke to Princess Lirelei in a way that was ... informal, but I meant no disrespect. In my culture, what I said was meant as a compliment." One of the judges, an elderly female with intricate patterns carved into her crystal armor, leaned forward. "You called the princess beauty? This suggests you view her as an object for your pleasure, rather than a person worthy of respect?" "No, that's not what I meant at all," Danny said quickly. "I called her beautiful because she is beautiful. I was trying to be friendly." "Friendly?" another judge questioned, his voice sharp. "Believe royalty should be treated as your friend?" Danny felt Dr. Parker's warning hand on his arm, but he couldn't stop himself from speaking honestly. "Honor. On Earth, we believe that all people should be treated with respect, regardless of their birth or position. I wasn't trying to insult Princess Lirelei. I was trying to show her that I saw her as a person, not just a title." The judges exchanged glances, and Danny could see that his words had surprised them. Emperor Valdris studied him for a long moment. "Before speaking, you say all people should be treated equally. Yet you have leaders on your world, do you not? Military commanders, scientists, teachers?" "Yes, Your Imperial Majesty, we do. But they earn their positions through their actions and abilities, not because of who their parents were." This statement caused a stir among the judges. They began speaking among themselves in their musical language, their voices rising and falling, in patterns that sounded almost like singing. Danny couldn't understand the words, but he could feel the tension in the room growing. Princess Lirelei entered the hall at that moment. Danny's heart began to race, just as it had during their first meeting. She wore armor that seemed to be made of pure light, and her silver hair floated around her head like she was underwater. When she looked at him, her violet eyes were unreadable. "Princess," Emperor Valdris said, "you have requested to speak at this trial. The court will hear your words." Lirelei walked to the center of the hall, moving with the same graceful dignity Danny remembered. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the crystal chamber. "Honored judges, I have spent much time thinking about this human's words. At first, I was angry because no one had ever spoken to me in such a casual way. But as I considered his behavior, I began to realize something important." She turned to look directly at Danny, and he felt like she could see right through him. This human looked at me and saw not a princess, not a symbol of power, but simply a person he found attractive. In our society, such a thing is impossible. Everyone who speaks to me does so with careful words, chosen to flatter or to gain favor. But this human spoke without calculation, without hidden meaning. He spoke from his heart. Frowned. "Princess, are you saying that disrespect should be rewarded?" "I am saying that perhaps there is value in honesty, even when it comes without perfect manners," Lirelei replied. "This human's people have achieved something we have not. They have learned to see past titles and positions to the person beneath." Before anyone could respond, alarms began to sound throughout the hall. The crystal walls flashed red, and a voice echoed through the chamber speaking in the Valareth language. Danny couldn't understand the words, but the panic in the voice was. Cleared out High Admiral Theron burst into the hall, his usually perfect composure shattered. "Your Imperial Majesty," he said, breathing hard, "the Void Hunters have broken through our outer defenses. They're attacking the system with a massive fleet." Emperor Valdris rose from his seat, his face grim. "How many ships?" "Over 200. "Your Imperial Majesty. They appeared without warning and have already destroyed 3 of our patrol vessels." Danny had heard of the Void Hunters during his time on the Valarth ship. They were a savage race that attacked other civilizations, destroying everything they couldn't steal. They were the nightmare that haunted the galaxy, appearing without, warning to bring death and destruction. "Your Imperial Majesty," Danny spoke up, surprising everyone in the room. "The New Horizon is still in this system. We may not have your advanced technology, but we can help fight." The Emperor stared at him in amazement. "Human, you were on trial for insulting my daughter. Why would you offer to help defend my people?" Danny thought for a moment before answering, "'Cause it's the right thing to do. The Void Hunters are everyone's enemy. If we can help save lives, then we should help." Princess Lirelei stepped forward. "Father, I believe this human speaks truly.
Else.
His people may have something to offer that our forces lack. What could they possibly offer?" Admiral demanded. "Their ship is primitive compared to ours." "Unpredictability," Lirelei said simply. "Our battle tactics have been perfected over thousands of years. Void Hunters know how we fight because they have faced us many times before, but they have never faced humans." Emperor Valdris considered this for a moment. "Very well, human. Danny Brooks, I offer you a choice. You may remain here and complete your trial, or you may help us defend against the Void Hunters. If you choose to fight and survive, your trial will be considered complete, regardless of the outcome of the battle." Danny didn't hesitate. "I choose to fight, Your Imperial Majesty." The Emperor nodded. "Then let us see what humanity has to offer in battle." As alarms continued to sound throughout the Crystal City, Danny found himself walking beside Princess Lirelei toward the command center. Tony Rodriguez and Dr. Parker flanked them, both looking nervous but determined. "Princess," Danny said as they walked, "I want you to know that I really am sorry about what I said during our first meeting. I didn't mean to offend you." Lirelei glanced at him, and for the first time since he had met her, he saw something like a smile cross her face. "Human Danny Brooks," she said, "I am beginning to think that perhaps your people's directness is not such a terrible thing. In the coming battle, we will need soldiers who speak their minds and act without hesitation. Does this mean you forgive me?" Danny asked hopefully. "Ask me again, after we have saved my people," Lirelei replied, but there was warmth in her voice that hadn't been there before. As they reached the command center, Danny could see the tactical displays showing the approaching Void Hunter fleet. The enemy ships looked like mechanical insects, all sharp angles and cruel weapons. There were so many of them that they blocked out the stars. But as he looked around at the Valart's military officers preparing for battle, and at his own friends standing ready to fight beside him, Danny felt something he hadn't expected, felt hope. The trial was over, but the real test was just beginning. The command center of Crystallia buzzed with activity as Valareth officers moved between glowing control panels that showed the approaching enemy fleet. Danny stood next to Princess Lirelei at the main tactical display, watching red dots that represented Void Hunter ships moving steadily toward the planet. There were so many enemy vessels that the screen looked like it was covered in blood. "Their attack pattern is the same as always," High Admiral Theron said grimly. "They will send wave after wave of ships to wear down our defenses, then bring in their heavy cruisers to finish us." Captain Jake Martinez appeared on the communications screen from the bridge of the New Horizon. His face was tense but determined. "Danny, we're ready to help however we can. What do you need us to do?" Danny looked at the tactical display and then at Princess Lirelei. "Princess, how do your ships usually fight these attacks?" "Our fleet moves in perfect formation," she explained, pointing to blue dots on the screen that represented Valareth's ships. "Each ship has its assigned position and follows the battle plan exactly. It is the most efficient way to use our superior weapons and shields." "And the Void Hunters know this?" Danny asked. "Of course. We have fought them many times over the centuries. They know our tactics as well as we do." Danny studied the enemy formation for a moment, his mind racing. What if we did something they wouldn't expect? High Admiral Theron looked at him with barely hidden contempt. "Human, our battle strategies have been perfected over thousands of years. They cannot be improved by someone who has never seen real space combat." "That's exactly why they can be improved," Danny shot back. "You've been fighting the same way for so long that you've become predictable." Before the Admiral could respond, the first wave of Void Hunter ships entered weapons range. The space around Crystallia exploded into light as energy beams crossed the darkness between opposing fleets. Danny watched in amazement as the Valoreth ships moved like dancers, each one following its part in a carefully planned routine. It was beautiful, but it was also exactly what the Void Hunters expected. The enemy ships moved to counter every Valareth formation, matching their ancient tactics with practiced ease. "Captain Martinez," Danny called out to the communication screen. "Can you see what's happening out there?" "I see it," Jake replied. "Both sides are fighting like they're following a script." "That's because they are," Danny said. He turned to Princess Lyrile. "Princess, what would happen if some of your ships broke formation and attacked from unexpected angles?" "It would disrupt our entire battle plan," she said, looking shocked at the suggestion. "Our ships would not know how to respond." "But neither would the Void Hunters," Danny pointed out. "Princess, sometimes the best plan is to have no plan at all." Lyrile stared at him for a moment, her violet eyes wide. "You want us to fight? Randomly? Not randomly? Creatively. Let me show you what humans can do." Danny turned to the communication screen. "Captain, I want you to ignore the Valoreth formations completely. Pick targets and attack them, however you think best.
Make it
Up as you go along. Danny, are you sure about this?" Jake asked. "Trust me, Captain. Show them what human creativity looks like." The New Horizon broke away from the Valoreth fleet and dove toward the enemy formation at an angle no one expected. The human ship was smaller and less powerful than either. The Valoreth or Void Hunter vessels, but it moved with a wild unpredictability that caught everyone by surprise. Jake brought his ship up under a Void Hunter cruiser and fired all weapons at point-blank range. The enemy ship, expecting the humans to attack from the front like proper military doctrine demanded, had left its belly unshielded. The concentrated fire punched through the alien armor and sent the cruiser spinning out of control. Possible. "Hi, Admiral Theron breathed. "No ship should attack from that angle." "That's the point," Danny said excitedly. "Captain, keep it up. Hit them where they don't expect it." The New Horizon spun away from the destroyed cruiser and immediately changed direction again, time diving between two Void Hunter destroyers, and firing at both of them as it passed. The enemy ships tried to turn to follow, but ended up shooting at each other instead of the human vessel. Princess Lyrile watched the display with growing amazement. "This is madness," she whispered, "but it's working." The Void Hunter fleet, which had been advancing in perfect order just moments before, began to show signs of confusion. Ships started breaking formation to chase the unpredictable human vessel, disrupting their own battle plan. "Princess," Danny said urgently, "now's the time." "They're confused. Hit them with everything you have." Lyrile hesitated for only a moment before turning to her communication officer. "All ships, break formation. Attack targets of opportunity. Follow the human ship's example." High Admiral Theron looked horrified. "Princess, this goes against every principle of space warfare, and perhaps it is time to learn new principles," she replied firmly. The Valoreth fleet scattered across the battlefield, each ship captain suddenly free to use their own judgment instead of following rigid orders. Some of them seemed lost without their formations, but others embraced the freedom and began attacking with the same wild creativity they had just witnessed from the humans. The effect on the Void Hunter fleet was immediate and devastating. Ships that had been programmed to respond to Valoreth's tactics found themselves facing attacks from directions and angles they had never encountered before. Their formation collapsed as ships struggled to adapt to the chaos. Meanwhile, on the surface of Crystallia, Tony Rodriguez was leading a mixed force of human and Valoreth soldiers against Void Hunter ground troops that had managed to land near the capital city. The enemy soldiers were fierce and well-armed, but they fought with the same rigid tactics their fleet used in space. "These guys fight like robots," Tony called out to his Valoreth partner, a young warrior named Kale who Danny had met on the journey to Crystallia. "They do the same thing over and over. How do we defeat them?" Kale asked, ducking behind a crystal barrier as enemy fire exploded around them. Tony grinned. "We don't do what they expect. Follow me, instead of advancing straight toward the enemy. Positioned like military doctrines suggested, Tony led his force in a wide circle, using the crystal buildings of the city for cover. The Void Hunters, expecting a frontal assault, had positioned all their heavy weapons to face the wrong direction. When Tony's force hit them from the side, the enemy soldiers were caught completely off guard. Kale watched in amazement as the human tactics shattered the Void Hunter ground force in minutes. "Your people fight like no one I have ever seen," Kale said as they secured the area. "We fight like humans," Tony replied simply. Back in the command center, Dr. Lisa Parker was proving that human creativity worked in more than just combat. She had been studying the Void Hunter ships on the tactical display when she noticed something strange about their energy signatures. "Princess Lirelei," she called out urgently, I think I've found a weakness in their ships." Lirelei hurried over to where Lisa was working. "What have you discovered?" "The Void Hunters use a central power core to run all their ship systems," Lisa explained, pointing to her analysis. "If we can overload that core, their entire ship will shut down." "How do we overload it?" "We need to hit them with a specific frequency of energy pulse. The problem is, our weapons aren't designed to produce that frequency." Danny looked over from the main tactical display. "What if we modify the New Horizons communications array? We use different technology than the Valareth. Maybe our systems can produce the frequency you need." Lisa's eyes lit up. It might actually work, but someone would have to get very close to the enemy ships to make it effective. "Leave that to us," Danny said, opening a channel to Captain Martinez. "Captain, Dr. Parker has found a way to shut down the Void Hunter ships. We need to modify our communication system." "Tell me what you need," Jake replied immediately. As Lisa worked with the New Horizons engineers to modify their systems, the space battle continued to rage above Crystallia. The Valarith ships were fighting with new freedom and creativity, but the Void Hunters still had superior numbers. Several Valarith vessels had been destroyed, and the enemy was beginning to adapt to the new tactics. "The modification is complete," Lisa announced. "But the New Horizon will have to get within a few hundred meters of a Void Hunter ship to make it work." "That's practically ramming distance," Princess Lirelei said with concern. Danny smiled grimly. "Then I guess we better hope Captain Martinez is as good a pilot as he thinks he is." The New Horizon broke away from the main battle and headed straight for the largest Void Hunter ship, a massive cruiser that served as the enemy flagship. Plasma bolts filled the space around the human vessel as it dove toward what looked like certain destruction at the last possible moment. Jake pulled the ship up and fired the modified communication pulse directly into the enemy cruiser's hull. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the massive Void Hunter ship went completely dark, its lights and weapons shutting down as the pulse overloaded its power core. "It worked," Lisa shouted. But their celebration was short-lived. The attack on the flagship had cost them. The New Horizon had taken heavy damage in its desperate run, and Danny could see on the tactical display that the ship was in serious trouble. The battle for Crystallia lasted 6 more hours, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Once Dr. Parker's discovery about the Void Hunter power cores spread through the Valareth fleet, the enemy ships began falling one by one. The frequency pulse that could shut down their vessels was devastating, and the Void Hunters had no defense against it. What impressed Princess Lirelei most was not just the human discovery, but how quickly her own people learned to fight differently. Valarith captains, who had followed the same battle plans for centuries, suddenly began thinking like humans, attacking from unexpected angles and using tactics that had never been tried before. "The remaining Void Hunter ships are retreating," High Admiral Theron reported, though his voice sounded more confused than victorious. "They are fleeing the system." Danny watched the tactical display as the red dots representing enemy ships disappeared one by one into hyperspace. The blue dots of the Valareth fleet remained scattered across the battlefield, no longer in their perfect formations, but somehow stronger for it. "We did it," he said quietly, hardly believing it was over, Princess. Lirelei stood beside him, her violet eyes reflecting the lights of the command center. "Yes, we did it. Together." The word "together" hung in the air between them, carrying more meaning than either of them wanted to admit. During the battle, they had worked as a team, Human creativity combining with Valareth technology to create something neither could have achieved alone. Princess, Danny said, turning to face her, about what I said when we first met. ... You mean calling me a beauty princess? She asked, and Danny was surprised to see what looked like amusement in her eyes. Yeah, that. I really am sorry. I know. It was disrespectful. Leerley considered his words for a moment. Danny Brooks, I have been thinking about this during the entire battle. In my culture, when someone speaks to royalty, every word is carefully chosen. People tell me what they think I want to hear, or what will gain them favor, but you said exactly what you were thinking. Is that good or bad? Danny asked nervously. It is honest, she replied simply. And after fighting beside you and your people, I believe that honesty is something my empire needs more of. Before Danny could respond, Emperor Valdris entered the command center. The tall ruler looked tired but relieved, and when he saw Danny, he walked directly over to him. Human Danny Brooks, the Emperor said formally, you and your people have saved Crystallia and shown us things about warfare that we never imagined. How can the Celestial Empire repay this debt? Danny thought for a moment. Your Imperial Majesty, we don't want payment. We just want to be friends. Our two species can learn a lot from each other. Emperor Valdris exchanged a glance with his daughter, and Danny saw something pass between them, an understanding that had not been there before. Princess Leerley has convinced me that you speak truly, the Emperor said. Very well. Let us discuss what friendship between our peoples might look like. Over the next 3 days, while the New Horizon was being repaired in Crystallia's shipyards, representatives from both species worked to create an agreement. Danny found himself appointed as humanity's chief negotiator, a job he felt completely unprepared for. I'm a communications officer, he complained to Tony as they walked through the crystal gardens of the Imperial Palace. I'm not a diplomat. Maybe that's why you're perfect for the job, Tony replied. You don't talk like a politician. Just say what you mean. Princess Leerley said something similar, Danny admitted. Tony grinned. Speaking of the princess, you two seem to be spending a lot of time together. Danny felt his face grow warm. It was true that he and Leerley had been working closely on the treaty negotiations, but it had been strictly professional. Mostly. She's helping me understand Valareth culture, Danny said defensively. Uh-huh, Tony said, clearly not believing him. And you're helping her understand human culture, right? Something like that. What Danny didn't tell his friend was that his conversations with Princess Leerley had become the best part of each day. She was incredibly intelligent, with a quick wit that often surprised him. More than that, she seemed genuinely interested in learning about Earth and humanity. The princess had been especially fascinated by human art and music, things that were apparently very different in Valareth culture. Danny had played some Earth songs for her using his portable music player. Watching her face light up with wonder had been one of the most beautiful things he had ever seen. Your music has so much emotion, she had said after listening to a piece by Mozart. Our music is mathematically perfect, but it does not make me feel the way this does. That's because humans put their hearts into their art, Danny had explained. We don't worry about making it perfect. We just try to make it real. On the final day of negotiations, Dr. Parker made another discovery that changed everything. She had been studying Valareth technology and noticed something strange about their computer systems. Princess, she said excitedly as she burst into the negotiation room. I need to show you something important. Lisa led them to her temporary laboratory, where she had been analyzing Valareth's data storage devices. Your people's computers are incredibly advanced, she began, but they're all programmed the same way. Every ship, every building, every system uses identical programming. Of course, Princess Leerley said, confused. Why would we program them differently? We achieved perfect efficiency long ago. But that's exactly the problem, Lisa explained. Perfect efficiency only works if nothing ever changes. Your systems can't adapt to new situations because they were never designed to learn or grow. She pulled up a display showing Valareth computer code alongside human programming. Human computers are messier and less efficient, but they can learn and adapt. That's how we were able to modify our communication system to defeat the Void Hunters. Emperor Valdris, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped into the room. Dr. Parker, are you saying that our technological perfection is actually a weakness? I'm saying that perfection and growth can't exist together, Lisa replied carefully. Got it. To improve, you have to be willing to make mistakes and try new things. The Emperor was quiet for a long time as he considered this. Finally, he turned to Danny. Young human, it seems your people have much to teach us. Perhaps it is time for the Celestial Empire to learn how to be imperfect, the treaty that was signed. The next day was unlike anything either species had imagined when they first met. Instead of the usual trade agreements and non-aggression pacts, the Crystallia Accords established something entirely new. A partnership based on mutual learning and growth. Humanity would share their creativity and adaptability with the Valerth, while the Valereth would share their advanced technology and knowledge with humanity. More importantly, both species would work together to face the threats that existed in the galaxy. The signing ceremony took place in the same great hall where Danny's trial had begun. As he watched Emperor Valdris and Captain Martinez sign the historic document, Danny felt a hand slip into his. He looked down to see Princess Lirelei standing beside him. Thank you, she said softly. For what? Danny asked. For being yourself. For showing us that there is value in being honest and imperfect and real. Danny squeezed her hand gently. Thank you for giving me a chance to prove that humans aren't just rude barbarians. Well, Lirelei said with a smile that made his heart. Race, you are still rather rude. But perhaps that is not such a terrible thing. As the ceremony concluded, and both crews prepared for the New Horizons' departure, Danny found himself facing a difficult decision. Captain Martinez had offered him a promotion and a permanent position as humanity's first ambassador to the Celestial Empire. It means you'd have to stay here on Crystallia, Jake explained. Are you ready for that kind of responsibility? Danny looked around at the crystal city that had become familiar over the past week. He thought about the friends he had made among the Valereth people, the work that still needed to be done to build the alliance between their species and the violet-eyed princess who had become so important to him.
I like you, sir.
He said without hesitation. I think I am. Is the New Horizon prepared to leave for Earth with news of the historic alliance? Danny stood on the palace balcony with Princess Lirelei, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky.
Hey.
Do you ever regret what you said to me that first day? She asked. Danny considered the question seriously. His casual comment had nearly started a war, put his entire species at risk, and changed the course of his life completely. No, he said finally. I don't regret it at all. Why not? Danny turned to look at her, this amazing woman who had taught him so much about courage and honor and the importance of standing up for what you believe in. Because it brought us together, he said simply. And some things are worth any risk. Princess Lirelei smiled, and in that smile, Danny saw the future of two species learning to understand each other, to grow together, and to face whatever challenges the galaxy might bring. It had all started with 3 simple words. Hey, beauty princess. But it had become something much more important than either of them had ever imagined. The age of humanity among the stars had begun, and it would be built, not on perfection, but on the willingness to be honest, to take risks, and to see the person behind the title.